I was not always this strong guy you see. I went through a lot of hard times in my life to get here today.
In a society where mediocrity is too often the standard and too often rewarded, there is intense fascination with men who detest mediocrity, who refuse to define themselves in conventional terms, and who seek to transcend traditionally recognized human capabilities.
I believe, everything I try to do is kind of defined by excellence. I don't think I ever reach excellence myself, because I have my standards of my life are really high. So I don't think I ever reach it, but...
He's a world champion ultramarathon runner, ultra-distance cyclist, triathlete, world record holder for the most pull-ups in 24 hours.
Did you sleep?
No.
Did you stop and rest ever, or...?
I went to the bathroom once and I got up and kept on going.
The man who will adapt and overcome any and all obstacles.
I've done a lot of things I thought were impossible. Nothing's impossible anymore.
All I wanted to be was an uncommon man. In my whole life, I was not that.
David Goggins has cracked the code to unlocking one's potential. He's figured out how to self-direct change to a degree I don't think has ever been seen before. He's literally figured out how to will himself to do the impossible. Billionaires, high-level businessmen, elite athletes all pay him for advice on how to level up in their lives. And scientists and peak performance researchers study him to try and figure out how the hell it is he does what he does with his brain and body.
You gotta figure out your own personal equation. And once you figure out that equation, you now become a mathematical fucking genius about yourself. And then from there, once you realize 3.14 is pi, you can solve any fucking equation in the world.
This will be the first of a multi-part series examining the mind of David Goggins and the mental strategies he uses to overpower himself, essentially. I think every single person on this planet can benefit from his way of thinking. And for me personally, working on this video has been so rewarding. And I really feel like it has taken my mindset to the next level. Since this is the very first video in the series, we're going to be discussing today two very critical pieces, I think, to talking about him at all or his philosophies. And honestly, I think that the second half is potentially better than the first. So if you get bored, just, hop to the second half. And now, a brief message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Babbel. Babbel is the #1 language learning app in the world with over 10 million subscriptions worldwide. It's been a while since I've been on a trip, as I'm sure it has for many of you. I daydream all the time about my next trip, and one of my favorite things to do is meticulously plan my itinerary so I get to experience all the best of the place that I travel to. But there have been a few times where one very important detail that I've overlooked is learning enough of the language to get myself by in different situations. Babbel is different than other apps, and their learning methods have been proven to get you speaking a different language in just 3 weeks. And you only need 10 to 15 minutes a day. So if you're like me and you like to plan every detail of your trip, you could add that to that time and make it extra productive. Going to a country and not learning enough of the language to get yourself by is possibly one of the worst travel mistakes anyone can make. Take it from me. I did it once and I won't do it again. It really allows you to be fully engaged with whatever country you go to and to truly get the most out of your trip. After such a long time away from traveling, you better believe that the next time I go on a trip, I'll have my conversational phrases airtight so I can really get the most out of my first trip back. If you're interested in doing the same, click the link in the description box and get up to 50% off your Babbel subscription. Thank you again to Babbel for sponsoring this video.
And back to the video. Now, I assume most people watching will already be familiar with David Goggins' story, but for those who aren't, we'll start with a little context.
What got me to this point was I was just the opposite of what I am today. I was that guy who ran away from absolutely everything that I got in front of me. No one knew what was going on in that house on 201 Paradise Road. My dad was a big time pimp, big time. Anything bad about a person, big time hustler, beat the shit out of me, the shit out, out of my mom.
The beatings were horrible, but the mind torture was the worst. He got so deep in my head as a young kid, and that really fucks up your foundation.
I had a learning disability, had a severe stutter,
And I suffered from toxic stress. So I had a whole bunch of white blotches all over my skin, you know, hair falling out of my head as a young kid. My mom got courage to finally leave him, moved to a small town in Brazil, Indiana. And that's when the real war started for me. I had stuff on my notebook, you know, Nick, we're gonna kill you. Got my first car, they spray painted, Nick, we're gonna kill you on it. In my mind, I was always afraid. And even though no one knew how fucked up I was, kind of create this other person who was tough, I lived with this shit all the time. Everything in my life, when something got hard, I quit. I had to work harder than you, so I quit. I wasn't great at things, so I quit. I was just an insecure, scared kid. And I was exactly what everybody said I was gonna be, which was nothing. I just wanted to go the distance. Like, man, if I could just go that distance, that extra mile, to just go, just to finish. I want to finish. I had two options. To either be that 300-pound guy who sprayed for cockroaches and made $1,000 a month. When I'm 50 fucking years old, I can reflect on this and think about what guy I never became. Or I can totally just sack it up and fail and fail and fail until I succeed. So I started calling recruiters up. I said, I'm gonna go be a fucking Navy SEAL.
From insecure and full of doubt to someone commonly referred to as the toughest man alive. If we're trying to discover how a person can change for the better, or what the elements of human transformation look like, there's probably no one alive today as fascinating a specimen as David Goggins.
In a 150-mile race at mile 75, when I feel really bad, that's the only time you can find out what you're made of, to find out limits to myself, limits to the human soul. And every day I'm trying to see if I have limits.
There's a lot of people out there that feel trapped and they feel stuck and they feel like they can't do anything. This is who they are. You're a guy who felt that exact same way, but figured out how to not be that person and be a person that you would admire. How did you?
I started realizing through this process that the fucking mind is what you created. And I started opening different doors that I didn't think were even there, that I didn't think even existed. And the more doors I opened up, the more I started realizing that my potential is damn near endless. And it changed my whole mindset.
Some people believe that no matter how hard they try, no matter how hard they work, at the end of the day, some people were born to win and others were born to lose. They believe that even if they gave it everything that they had, nothing would change because their life is the way it is, because they are who they are. Still, more people aren't quite so pessimistic about their abilities as that, but still get that occasional pang of fear in the back of their minds that says, maybe you're just not good enough. And this is what makes David Goggins' story so special. He was that guy. He was worse than that guy. And he proves, anecdotally anyway, that anyone is capable of enormous change. The idea that people are stuck and can't change has been proven false not only anecdotally by people like David Goggins, but also scientifically as well. The best and most irrefutable example of this is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change itself in response to experience. What this means is we're not stuck with the brains we're born with, and therefore we're not stuck being however it is we are right now. If the brain can change, we can change. Now, that's not to say that everything about a person can change, but most things that we might want to change in life are learnable skills. Intelligence, willpower, resilience, reductions in anxiety or neuroticism. Some psychologists even believe that fundamental elements of our personality can change, which is something that up until now wasn't even on the table. So obviously a lot about us can change. But regardless of all of this anecdotal and scientific evidence that people can change, there are still going to be people who say, I'm different. I can't change because of something about me. And the problem with this is this attitude tends to become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Before David Goggins became the iron-willed, unstoppable person he is today, he had what he described as a quitting mind, and he allowed it to dictate to him how far he could go in life, constantly giving up on himself too soon because of the way he viewed himself. But something about that moment in his living room, overhearing the Navy SEALs documentary on TV,
they are among the most secret military units within the United States Armed Forces.
He knew that this was the perfect training ground to figure out how to overcome himself once and for all.
BUDS is a 27-week selection course designed to find the men with an ability to ignore pain, requiring a strict emotional and mental control unimaginable to most people. Each week is designed to be more difficult than the last. Those who quit must ring a ship's bell 3 times in front of the entire class. 70% of the men who begin BUDS never finish.
One of the first things he does after watching this is attempt a 4-mile run, only to make it 400 meters before being so dizzy that he had to sit down.
Who the fuck did I think I was? I was born nothing, I'd proven nothing, and I still wasn't worth a damn thing. David Goggins, a Navy SEAL? What a pipe dream. I couldn't even run down the block for 5 minutes. All my fears and insecurities I'd bottled up for my entire life started raining down on my head. I was on the verge of giving in and giving up for good.
But then he tries again. He pushes through the pain and makes it an entire mile, and the pain fades. And he says something really important. That's when I first realized that not all physical and mental limitations are real.
I think that this one crucial insight, this moment where David Goggins first really recognized that our experience is our perception of reality and not reality itself. I think that this key moment represents the beginning of David Goggins conquering himself once and for all and becoming David Goggins as we know him today. It seems like up until this point in his life, whenever David Goggins would try and do something hard, he'd have all these feelings, anxiety, fear, doubt, and thoughts that told him to stop. And therefore, he would stop. But here, when he pushes through the pain and what he thought was his absolute limit, he discovers that what the mind says is not necessarily true, and that you can always choose a new response to an old scenario. Experiences are subjective. Their interpretation is up to the user. And I think a lot of people don't realize the degree to which this is true, and then kind of feel at the mercy of their emotions the way David Goggins did up until this point. I know for a long time that's certainly the way I felt. For example, you may have heard before that there's actually very little difference, physiologically speaking, between anxiety and excitement. In both instances, your heart rate picks up, cortisol surges, your breathing changes, maybe you get a little sweaty, but it's not until this feeling is filtered through what we know about the situation, what we know about ourselves, and what we've done in previous experiences that we actually decide whether or not we are anxious or excited. And there are plenty of studies that have shown that when people choose to feel excitement over anxiety by framing it that way in their minds, their performance actually improves on whatever it is they were trying to do. They're harnessing the power of that feeling and choosing fight over flight, essentially. In other words, it's ultimately our perspective that determines how we react. And some reactions are, of course, more beneficial than others. Sometimes our perspective or life experiences can tilt us in a direction that has us chronically interpreting things in a more negative or threatening way than might be necessary or appropriate. And this can result in us cutting our potential short prematurely. In David Goggins' case, he genuinely had a very hard life, and he viewed himself as a statistic. And this attitude was becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. We all have limiting beliefs and rules about ourselves in the world that don't serve us and that are just waiting to be challenged. But we always retain the ability to question what the mind says is true about ourselves, particularly when it's negative. Frame our experiences in a more positive light and intentionally respond with more resiliency. And I think we've certainly seen through David Goggins that when we do this, we really unlock new levels of potential within ourselves. But if unchallenged, our beliefs can cap off our potential in subtle and not so subtle ways.
One of the most iconic examples of how beliefs influence behavior is the story of the 4-minute mile. Legends hold that people had tried for over 1,000 years to run a 4-minute mile, despite the fact that experts had declared that it was physically impossible for the human body. Over this time period, the world's fastest and most talented athletes tried thousands of times and came close, but always failed to crack it. Except that on the morning of May 6, 1954,
those last few seconds seemed never-ending. I knew I had done it before I even heard the time.
Roger Bannister would clock in at 3:59.4. But what's more, after thousands of years of failed attempts, it would only be 46 days until his record was broken by someone else.
When Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, he reframed the entire world's belief about what was possible for a human being. And in doing so, it dissolved that mental barrier and freed the minds of the other runners from their limiting concepts of what it was possible for them to achieve. This is a very famous story and an extremely illuminating example of the nature of the human mindset and the power of our beliefs to be self-fulfilling prophecies for good or for bad. It was never true that a human couldn't run a sub 4-minute mile. Thousands of people have gone on to do so today. But believing that it was true kept countless numbers of physically capable runners from achieving that feat. And you can imagine at a personal level what beliefs we hold about ourselves that cap off and change the trajectory of what we're able to do on a daily basis.
I want you to realize that this world, life, is one big head game. And once you learn to play the motherfucking head game, it's no longer a game anymore at all. You can start living your life.
How our beliefs actually translate from thought to behavior and how they affect our outcomes and potential is probably most simply summarized by Carol Dweck's groundbreaking discovery of the fixed versus growth mindsets. In a fixed mindset, people believe their basic abilities, their intelligence, their talents are just fixed traits. They have a certain amount and that's it. In a growth mindset, people understand that people can change, that their talents and abilities can be developed through effort, learning, and persistence. These two mindsets fundamentally change our perspective toward the world. And I think that there are 3 elements of this in particular that result in this self-fulfilling prophecy aspect of our mindsets and beliefs. First off, the amount of free will we subjectively experience in our day-to-day lives, i.e. how much control I feel I have over my own actions and how far I think I can go if I apply myself. This influences everything from how much effort we're willing to exert toward a goal to whether we ever bother creating meaningful goals for ourselves at all. Next, what we link our experience of reward to. The individual with a fixed mindset is only satisfied when they're winning, whereas the individual with a growth mindset ties their experience of reward to the process, to the effort. You can imagine the implications of this. The fixed mindset person is not going to have as much grit or determination because they're not going to be rewarded as often. And third, and possibly most important, how we respond to challenge and failure. People with a fixed mindset shrink away from challenge. They treat failure and difficulty as a reflection of their total ability or lack thereof. So they're less likely to try unless they think they're likely to win. Whereas people with a growth mindset don't just embrace challenge, but they seek it out. They actually enjoy it to some degree because they recognize it as the pathway to growth.
To become the person he knew he could be, David Goggins decided he needed to learn to master his mind and create a whole new mindset. A mindset that would never accept failure as an option, that wouldn't yield to fear, pain, or doubt, and would empower him to face any obstacle or difficulty in his life head on.
Once you change one thing, your mindset, you can attack everything.
He has since succeeded at this goal to such a degree that many of his accomplishments defy logic, including what might be his most incredible feat to date, running a 24-hour race with no prior training and limited cardiovascular fitness. In case you missed that, let me repeat myself. Running for 24 hours with no training. This race really challenged him. First, his lungs buckled, and each breath began to burn and sting. Next, his feet and shins throbbed, sending shockwaves of excruciating pain through his body, likely from the cracked toenails, numerous stress fractures, and the torn muscles he would discover later. Then, as his body broke down further and he lost control of essential functions, mucus, urine, and blood were expelled through his body as he ran. He felt his mind losing grip with reality as the pain became more and more unbearable. But miraculously, using nothing more than his will to succeed, he found energy where he had none and completed the 24-hour 100-mile race that day. And in doing this and countless other feats of impossibility, David Goggins has transformed from someone deep in the fixed end of the mindset spectrum to someone who might now be considered the human embodiment of the growth mindset.
The journey, I had to realize this is part of my process versus just saying, like I used to, I'm just not good enough. If I'm not good enough, we always say that shit. I'm just not good enough, and then we try something else. I'm gonna fucking make myself good enough. And that became my mentality. I'm gonna make myself good enough.
He believes at his core he can do anything, and therefore he probably experiences more subjective free will than anyone alive. You know, the type of free will that allows someone to run a 24-hour race with zero training at all, or run on broken legs, or whatever he was doing in this photo. And therefore, he has more power to do whatever it is he wants to do without any doubt or self-efficacy issues getting in the way. Next, his entire life is dedicated to growth and pushing himself further than he could go yesterday. And obviously, he finds this deeply rewarding. He's not looking for some sort of outcome, he's happy just putting in the work and working on himself. But as a result of this attitude, he's been able to achieve so much in his life. By not focusing on the outcome and instead focusing on the process, he's gotten quite a great outcome. And third, most importantly, I think, the meaning that he assigns to failure and the way he embraces challenge.
All right, everybody, you see me smiling, why? Because it kind of sucks out here in New York City. Worse weather, we get better. I'm kind of happy, but I was hoping to be a lot worse.
David Goggins started out like anyone else. When he felt fear, difficulty, self-doubt, he took those feelings to mean stop, to mean that maybe he wasn't cut out for whatever he was doing. To now, flipping this around on its head to the point that he not only embraces fear and challenge, but he views it as the path forward.
Do you have any fears today?
I do have a lot of fears today. But it's hard for me to call them fears anymore.
Yeah.
I don't use that word anymore. They're almost like it's another challenge.
Yeah.
Because anything that makes me feel that fear feeling is going to get overcome.
You go do it.
It's going to get conquered. That's almost like fear is my ultimate guide.
Of where you're supposed to be
going. Of where I'm supposed to be going.
Yeah.
It's my ultimate guide.
I think it's so important to note here that David Goggins still feels fear and experiences difficulty, but now the meaning that he assigns these things is much, much different.
I'm kind of happy, but I was hoping to be a lot worse.
It's the meaning that we assign to different situations based on our mindsets that determines how we react and what path we take. We all have fears and failures and feelings that tell us to quit, but if to us, those things mean, hey, we're doing something right, then we're much, much more likely to persevere. Fear is a feeling, stress is a feeling, but ultimately we decide whether they mean stop or go, fight or flight. And David Goggins has not only figured this out, but crafted a mindset that allows him to take any obstacle and turn it into fuel for his success. To such an extent and so many times and in so many extreme situations that he's now definitely wired his brain up very differently and in a very advantageous way, which is something we're going to be talking about in later episodes in the series. Now, interestingly, these characteristics of the growth mindset are not just vital to David Goggins and who he is, but they are very, very, very common in top performers across all different genres of life. Look at their relationship with failure, for example. There's the iconic story of Michael Jordan not making his high school basketball team.
Michael Jordan was famously able to leverage this failure as fuel. So much so that he's talked about visualizing the moment he realized his name wasn't on the sheet and recalling this mental image and feeling whenever he didn't feel motivated to practice that day.
I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
But you can imagine how many kids, just as talented as Michael Jordan, didn't make the team, went home and said, I guess I'm not good enough. How many extremely successful people have you heard of that have basically used whatever negative situation they had and turned it into kindling for their growth as human beings. Change by necessity involves evaluating the belief systems that we have that are not really serving us and swapping them out for something that is more useful. It involves creating a new mindset, and David Goggins has shown that no matter where we start, we all have the power to do this. And Carol Dweck's research has shown that anyone can learn the growth mindset, and that doing so improves results.
Once you break these barriers that you have made for yourself, like the mind is the most powerful thing in the world. In the world. It is so amazing that I used to be a 300-pound guy, and I thought that was it.
So how exactly do we conquer the mind and make a new one according to David Goggins? Well, the first step seems to be recognizing we are not it. David Goggins calls this the governor.
Because we forget we are in control of our mind. We believe it's the other way around.
And it's the survival mechanism. It protects us from pain and suffering. The second we feel that shit, our mind says, oh no, this isn't fun. We should back off. And it starts to push you away from that shit. It pushes you in a direction that is comfortable.
It knows what scars you. It knows your fears. It knows your insecurities. It knows, and it keeps you away from all that. That's why it says don't jump out of an airplane. Don't go in the ocean where there's sharks. It's a protective mechanism. Don't go back to the place where your dad beat the shit out of you in your mind. Don't go back. We put in our minds what we should do. But we believe our mind is telling us, it's giving us all this feedback. We have to reprogram it and tell us, no, we're good. We're good, this sucks, but it's okay.
The brain protects you, but protects you so much, it doesn't allow growth.
This idea that our experience is very negotiable and that our beliefs, feelings, and thoughts can't always be trusted suggests a very important point, and that's that the mind and the self are not one in the same. And the mind has its own nature and priorities, and these can be adversarial to our true selves and our goals unless we actively seek to overcome it. And I think David Goggins' governor concept is very useful in trying to create the mind as per this section. But if you're already familiar with mindfulness or any other number of strategies, you'll already know that we are not the narrator, but the observer, the overseer of what happens in our brains. And giving it a sort of adversarial name, David Goggins is separating himself from it and preparing to challenge it, essentially. He's really disassociating himself from the parts of himself that seek to limit what he can do. And as David Goggins has said, the governor has the tactical advantage over us. So unless we've learned to really and truly separate ourselves from all of these thoughts, they will sound like us and they will feel like us. So the more space we can put between ourselves and them, the more we can disassociate, the more objective we can be. From there, we can go to self-observation. Discovering the appropriate strategy that will allow us to overcome ourselves and conquer the governor begins with observing ourselves when we try and fail at something that we want to do. Whatever it is we're trying to change, or whatever it is we're trying to will ourselves to do, like David Goggins, if we can bring all of our attention and our awareness to our thoughts and feelings that we're having in these moments, to whatever BS the governor is saying to us to try and get us to quit, well, we're going to discover crucial insights and pieces of information that we can now use on ourselves the next time. As an example of this, early on in training, David Goggins learned that if he focused on the next step and only the next step, and he didn't let his mind get away from him, if he didn't start thinking, oh my God, I have like a week more of this, I have however many more hours, how am I gonna do this? Then he could keep going. But if he didn't, if he let his mind expand, if he started thinking about the massive, impossible task at hand, then he would crumble. So through observing himself and his thoughts in these scenarios, he's learned where to bring his attention, his focus, and how to frame the situation in order to keep himself in the game. True willpower, I think, the type we see in David Goggins, is like a game we play against ourselves. And we are using everything we can to gain back some of that tactical advantage that the mind has over us. Which brings us to step 3. Doing. No self-observation or disassociation tools in the world matter at all unless we push ourselves out of our comfort zone and see what happens when we do. And the best training ground that David Goggins has discovered that he has at his disposal is through what he calls suffering.
It's not about suffering how people may look at suffering. In failure and in suffering, all the answers are in there.
We all have this voice. It's the right or wrong voice. And a lot of times that voice guides us into comfort. But I have this other voice I heard my whole life saying, hey, motherfucker, what are you doing? Nah, man, we gotta go over here. And I won't listen to it because over there was pain. That's where victory's at.
On the other end of suffering is a world that very few have ever seen. It's a beautiful world because that's where you find yourself. Like the 100-mile race I was on, I ran it for 24 hours. I found myself on the other end of that fucking race. That night.
Suffering is an absolutely brutal word, and I'm sure very few of us are willing to suffer by taking Navy SEALs training 3 times or any of the other ways that David Goggins voluntarily suffers pretty much every day of his life. So I'll switch to the word struggle because I feel like we can all relate to that word a little bit more. David Goggins has a serious point when he says we need to struggle to grow. I mean, the word change literally means to become different. So by necessity, in order to change, we need to step outside of our comfort zone. And very literally, if we think back to neuroplasticity, the core of any change we might make is of course taking place in our brains. And according to Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford, the process that allows our brain to change by nature feels uncomfortable.
You want to change your brain as an adult. Let's say you want to be less anxious. You want to learn a new language. You want to be more functional in some way, presumably. We need to accept that there's a period of agitation and stress that accompanies the dropping into these highly concentrated states. And that's because the circuits that turn on before acetylcholine are of the stress system. Unfortunately, there's a kind of obsession with the idea that it's all supposed to feel good. And it does feel good, but there's a whole staircase in which it feels kind of lousy.
If feelings of challenge and discomfort are necessary for the brain to change, then we can almost think of discomfort, stress, suffering as growing pains in that sense. And going back to growth mindset, if you'll remember, the individual with a growth mindset seeks out challenge, embraces it, and actually enjoys it because they see it as the key to becoming better.
So growth mindset is, I believe, if it's sort of a neuroscience lens on growth mindset, would be that the agitation and stress that you feel at the beginning of something and when you're trying to lean into it and you can't focus is just a recognized gate. You have to pass through that gate. What it means is that if you can recognize agitation, stress, and confusion as an entry point to where you eventually want to go, I do think that even just mental recognition can allow people to pass through it more easily. They think they're doing something wrong.
So all that really is just a shift in perspective, in belief about what struggle means to us. It's the realization that to get to wherever it is we want to go, we're gonna have to be uncomfortable on some level. And therefore, we may as well just lean in rather than resisting it. And this is such a pivotal, if not the defining characteristic of David Goggins. At some point, everything changed for him when he shifted that perspective on what difficulty and struggle meant to him. One of my favorite anecdotes about this perspective on challenge comes from Sir Edmund Hillary, who became the first person to climb Mount Everest in 1953.
The journey to the peak of Everest is an extremely challenging one. Hundreds of people have died in attempting it. And what's worse, many of their bodies remain littered along the trail to this day, as stark reminders of the brutality of the trek. Prior to his descent, a reporter asked Sir Edmund why he felt such a terribly dangerous trip was necessary. Why did he need to climb this mountain? And Edmund Hillary famously responded, "It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves."
I love that anecdote. It's literally one of my favorite anecdotes of all time. And it really does do a great job of speaking to the beauty of difficulty. And this is a truth we see in people every single day. People run marathons, go on weight loss journeys, learn a new language, climb mountains, and are profoundly transformed by the obviously very difficult journey that they've voluntarily undertaken to find more out of themselves and more out of life. And this challenge, this hard stuff, is worth any difficulty because it gives them purpose. But we all already know this because there's something deeply resonant about this type of story and psychological journey.
And in fact, according to the famed author Joseph Campbell, who studied the human experience through mythology and religion, this archetypal path of growth and transformation is found throughout the stories of every culture in the world. And that is the hero's journey, a narrative threaded throughout infinite myths, fairy tales, and of course, modern blockbuster hits. The hero is prompted with a crisis, or a call to adventure, a sudden, imminent need to change that will require leaving the safety of the familiar and venturing into the unknown. The hero is initially fearful and reluctant of the challenges ahead, questioning whether they have it in themselves at all. But what makes them the hero is that in spite of any fears they may have, they recognize the need to begin this journey, however difficult it may be. During their mission, the hero is tested in strength, skill, and character, fighting against their own ignorance, weaknesses, and temptations. And they don't win every battle, but they press on. And it's through the trials, struggles, and suffering they face that they are transformed. They have experiences along the way that show them who they are and make them feel truly alive, leading them to new levels of insight. The old self dies, and the new, wiser, more powerful self is reborn to take its place.
If you enjoyed that montage, leave me a comment and gas me up because I'm really proud of it because I thought it was so cute. Joseph Campbell's view of myth, after reportedly spending a ridiculous amount of time reading all the world's most important texts from all different religions, was that the purpose of myth was to supply humanity with the symbols and stories that would move the human spirit forward. It's the idea that the worst, most difficult situations in life present the greatest opportunity and can lead us to greener pastures if only we decide to face them like a hero. And of course, with David Goggins, the trials that he faced saved him from the limiting view of himself and the path that was taking him down. Quote, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek."
It's strictly about you finding who you are. So many people die, live 100 years, never fucking know who they are. Never know who they are. You have to look in that mirror and know there's so much more in here, man. Because I can literally right now be a 300-pound guy spraying for cockroaches still to this day if I did not look in that mirror and say, there has to be more to this. And then willing to go into it, dive deep into it, and give all I have to find it. I said, I'm tired of feeling the way I feel every day. I'm tired of how I feel. I'm tired of lying to myself, lying to people, and just being some piece of shit. And I always knew in the back of my mind I could be something special, but I knew the work it was gonna take was gonna kill me. I found the most life in the most uncomfortable places in the world.
This is the idea that there's some sort of self-discovery, internal bliss, confidence waiting for us in the difficult but infinitely worthwhile quest to conquer ourselves, struggling against our weaker parts to create ourselves as human beings, and to use our best thinking to decide the right path for us and then stay that path in the face of temptations, rather than defaulting to the path of least resistance, to put it like David Goggins, the comfortable path, the safe path, the easy path, but the path that means that circumstances will dictate who we are and what we ultimately become. Now, in day-to-day life, there's no magic letter being flown in by an owl or spider bite to call us to adventure. And maybe the Navy SEALs documentary on TV just doesn't call to us the way it did with David Goggins. So our call to adventure may not be as clear-cut. So on a practical level, on a day-to-day basis, that means engaging in some predetermined disciplines that we've deemed worthwhile because they bring us closer to our idealized version of ourselves, whatever that may be for us as individuals. We need some sort of a training ground to work on building some resilience and overcoming our weaker parts, as well as those self-observation strategies we talked about earlier in terms of overcoming the mind. And this is what David Goggins calls callousing his mind.
Anything that was fucking horrible in my life that I normally say no, I had to go do it. I started callousing my mind at this point in my life.
But if you can get through doing things that you hate to do, on the other side is greatness. How many times you're gonna have to do something that you don't want to do to get to where you want to go? There's gonna be more times you do something that you don't want to do than you are gonna want to do it. Some of this long list of things I don't want to do. And through that, I found myself. Yeah!
There are so many ways of explaining why discipline is such a beneficial practice for a person. So I'm going to list a bunch of them because I think I would be remiss if we just talked about one or even two or three angles of why this is so important to a human being in terms of feeling our best and creating well-being. And speaking of well-being, the term for that in psychology is flourishing. And for a human to flourish, they need several different aspects, many of which can be found in some sort of a worthwhile task that you take on to better yourself. Through discipline, you're building the neural circuits that will allow you to be better at anything that you like. The same neural circuits that are involved in forcing yourself to do one more rep are involved when you force yourself to sit down to work. And the more you do it, the easier it is to do it. From a perspective of, say, self-efficacy, regularly doing difficult stuff literally changes the narrative we tell ourselves about who we are, because we learn about ourselves through our own actions. So making a habit out of doing literally enables us to do more overall. In terms of resiliency and stress, leaning into the pain and regularly, voluntarily exposing yourself to stress raises our stress tolerance and of hard things across the board. Suddenly, things that seemed really hard before don't now. And now we're ready to be cool, calm, and collected for the inevitable tragedies of life. And all of this is not only growth mindset, but this whole turning your obstacles into advantages thing is pretty much the basis for Stoic philosophy. I could probably pull up 50 quotes from Emperor Marcus Aurelius that speak to that. And this is even Maslow's hierarchy, self-actualization, which according to Maslow was the highest order goal of the human animal. We have so much knowledge from so many different disciplines of thinking that really point to the same thing. So for me, that is pretty compelling. And it means that if we're not doing it, if we're not engaging in some sort of pre-planned disciplines, if we're not working hard on ourselves, then it stands to reason why we might not feel so great. And I say all of this to emphasize that working toward our best version of ourselves by overcoming our minds and our weaker parts and engaging in some difficult stuff on a regular basis in order to get to where we want to be is very obviously deeply essential to the human condition. We need to grow to flourish, and we need to struggle to grow. And we have so much information from so many different disciplines of thinking, from the philosophical to the spiritual to the neuroscience perspective, that point to this same thing. I could go on and on and on about how growth is essential to flourishing, but I'll let David Goggins tell you what the point of it all was.
Brings a great deal of pleasure to present to you retired Chief Petty Officer David Goggins.
When you were given the VFW award recently, you couldn't even speak.
Yeah, it almost chokes me up now. I had a moment in front of all these great American heroes of, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm getting an award like this. That kid who was in the fetal position the majority of his life. And when I looked out amongst all those people, it was a sense of pride that I can't even explain. It's the moments of 3 hell weeks. It's the moments of in that room by myself studying for hours and hours and hours, trying to catch up with all the kids who are above me. It's just those moments, like the real raw moments of life. I did that. I overcame that shit. You know, it's like, it's this power behind all that shit. And that's the feeling I was looking for in my life. I found it. It wasn't money, it wasn't fame, it wasn't awards. It was that feeling I have right now. The feeling of I'm about to break down, but it's not of like, oh my God, I'm upset. It's like I worked myself so hard that I turned a person this fucked up into this motherfucker right here. And I did it. I did it off of sure will. And very few people will know how that feels. Very few.
I love his idea of whatever you think you are, you have to fight to the death to become it. And there is so much joy to be found in that process, no matter how difficult it may be. as David Goggins proves with his insanely difficult choice of life. So many people are kind of like in this place with themselves where everything is just okay. And they've always been there. Everything's just kind of okay. And therefore there's nothing very obvious to fight against. And in that way, if you have something about yourself that really messes with you, well then you're in a great position because your path is clear on what you can do to live a better life and feel better about yourself. But it definitely all starts with that choice to create a mindset that is helpful and not hurtful. And I think if we can do these things, if we can keep questioning what the mind says is true and working to create a better one and leaning into the difficulty, then the rest will take care of itself. And that's my perspective from having researched change extensively as a hobby. Asterisk. I think these two components, if you can get them down, you can change anything. And you don't have to get them down to the level of David Goggins, because obviously that's a level above what most people want to do even. But with enough time and enough effort, I think that everyone can change whatever they want. It's like, to me, it's like a game of chess you play against yourself. And I think it is so fun. I think David Goggins' story is so important, and I can only imagine how many people he has pulled out of a dark place with his story. So I absolutely love him. A lot of people asked me what my perspective was in advance, and some people said they didn't like him, and I was like, in making this video, I had already read his book a few years ago, but to make it, I listened to every podcast multiple times, and I already said this, but it literally, I feel that my mindset is on a whole nother level now from doing this. So hopefully it positively benefited you. It was so fun to work on. I know I took it to a dramatic depth, but that's how I do. So I am so stoked to keep working on the series and to, in the future, get more granular about the strategies that he uses. He does a good job of that himself, but I'm going to blend different perspectives as I do. And but yeah, now that we've gotten the essential pieces to understanding his philosophy in general out of the way, we can really get more granular, I think. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was one of my favorite ones to make. I literally took extra time just researching it and tinkering with it because I really enjoyed it, and I'm so stoked to keep making videos on this topic. I hope that it helped you as much as it helped me. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.